Aloha, namaste. This is Radha Home, and I'm here with our full moon forecast. The full moon is happening July 3rd, but it's going to be at 1:38 a.m. here in Hawaii, which is 4:38 a.m. Pacific time, and still in the fairly early morning hours as we move farther east. So the moon itself will actually be at its fullest on Sunday night. If you want to, sit with the energy of the moon, it will be still growing on Sunday night, and by Monday night, it will be waning already. This particular full moon is also called Guru Purnima, which is the full moon. Purnima is the full moon phase of Guru, right? Many of you might know it as the word for teacher or somebody who's an enlightened being that imparts knowledge to us. The word gu itself is darkness, and ru relates to the dispelling of darkness, the breaking of the darkness. And so it's a being who takes us out of our state of darkness and brings us into the light. And this particular holiday falls in the month of Ashada, which is the Hindu month, and it reflects upon there being a full moon in Sagittarius, in sidereal Sagittarius, which is ruled by Guru, Jupiter. The planet Jupiter is called Guru in Sanskrit. And this is because Jupiter rules our teachers and our teachings and children who are our greatest teachers. It's where we get our higher wisdom. It's where we understand beyond just the facts and figures and details of our day-to-day existence, that there's something greater when we can pull out, expand, and have a bigger view of what's going on. And we can find truth that lasts the test of time, truth that is beyond this sort of circumstantial, temporal reality that we live in. So not the kind of truth you find, in your chosen news source, or from, data or information. And it's important because it comes in the new moon cycle of Gemini, right? Where we are focused on data and information, and this, facts and details, and this stream of information needs to have something to corral it. We need something to make sense of it. And beyond making sense of what's out there right now, this is a call to remember what really makes sense beyond any beliefs we can conjure up in this moment in time. What beliefs are still true from 5,000 years ago, from 1,000 years ago, from 100 years ago, from when you were first born? What is still true? The holiday is often honoring, in different religions, they honor different gurus. They might honor Shiva as the original yogi at this time, or Gautama Buddha for his birth into enlightenment at this time, his own dispelling of darkness and birth into the light. The sage Vyasa, who wrote the Mahabharata and the Puranic texts and the classified the Vedic texts. There's many gurus that can be honored specifically in this time. But the bigger picture for most of us, whether or not you have a specific guru that you relate to, is really to find that place within ourselves where we know what truth is. We can get caught up in all the arguments, particularly in this online world where people just say, one line and we interpret it in all these different ways, particularly when we're surrounded by so much pain, we're surrounded by so much suffering that maybe we're experiencing ourselves, or we're seeing our friends experience, or people we love and care about experience, or we're seeing out there in a greater society. And we can see how unjust it is and how wrong it is. And this really propels a lot of our beliefs. But when we can sink deeper in, we can find what is true no matter what. And this brings us more together rather than more apart. Our more limited beliefs tend to separate us more. They tend to divide us more. They tend to say, this is what I believe it's right, and that person, what they believe is wrong. And this is a lot of what society is based on now, is this division, this divisiveness, separating more. And true wisdom brings you more together, not just with your neighbors and your friends and your loved ones, but with yourself. right? More connected to yourself, less differentiating. So I'm going to share my screen and show how we have a lot of magic working in this moment for us, which I think we can all say we're some way coming out of the dark and into a light. It's been an intense time since the beginning of the year. We've really experienced a lot of pain, perhaps in our relationships, and maybe in other outside ways, you know, perhaps financially or big sudden upsets that have shifted people's sense of security and stability. And it's uncomfortable. Shifting is uncomfortable. Going through these breaks in our lives is painful, but it also helps to bring us closer to truth. And everything we do in the Vedic world is bringing us closer to truth. That's the point. The point isn't, you know, to get the job, to get the house, to get the girl, to get the thing. The point is to become closer to eternal truth, Sanatana Dharma. This is what our path is. And we each have our own personal swadharma, our personal truth that we're living that brings us closer to that greater truth, that eternal truth. So in this particular full moon, we're in a star called Purvashada. And Purvashada is the part of Sagittarius where we're planting new seeds. The star right before is called Mula, and this is chaos. This is uprooting. This is pulling everything out by the roots and saying, it's all wrong. And then Purvashada is where we use our discernment. It's symbolized by a winnowing basket, and we separate the kernels of wisdom, the kernels of truth from the husk, from that which is just shell that just holds it. And we plant the seeds and tend them, right? You can't just put a bunch of seeds in the earth. Anyone who's ever gardened knows you need to actually, you know, water and nurture what you're planting for it to grow. And from this, we get the early victory. Purva is the early and Ashada is the victory. And we get the victory of planting seeds of wisdom that will stand the test of time, instead of just planting seeds that are based on fear or based on what we know to be true right now. What we know to be true right now is really small compared to what we know to be true. This full moon has a drishti, a one-way gaze from Jupiter himself here in Aries. So we're getting Guru's drishti on his own full moon. And this is an action-packed guru. This is Jupiter in Aries. This is like acting on our beliefs, doing what we say or what we say we believe. And it can be a little impulsive, right? We're right now in this star of Bharani where we're bearing the consequences of our impulsivity, where we are needing to really contain and restrain our creative energy and make sure that we know what we're creating and that we're putting intention into it. So it's not just blah all over the place. But yet Rahu is here, the North Node, and this is, you know, Jupiter's moved out of Rahu's direct connection. They were, a few weeks ago, they were in direct connection, and we might have really felt exaggerated about how much we believe and how firm we are in our self-righteousness. But Rahu goes backwards, the nodes go backwards, and Jupiter's going forward right now. And so we have this experience of more clarity. Perhaps we're receiving some messages, perhaps we're receiving some downloads. The nodes can be very spiritual in that way. We can receive these sort of sudden knowings, and they can be very powerful, and they can also be delusional. But we're moved enough away where now Jupiter might be seeing what's clear and what was maybe a little bit more based in illusion, and giving this drishti to this full moon. It's very powerful. He's also giving his 5th house one-way drishti to Mars, who's just moved into Leo. And this is, you know, a big win for all of us, because Mars has been suffering for the last couple months in Cancer, where we really struggle with our action. We really struggle to even, you know, get up and do the normal things that we do every day, our normal daily discipline. let alone anything new and courageous. Mars is debilitated in Cancer because it's the place where we're the least able to individuate and fight. Mars is here to strengthen us. We're here to individuate ourselves. We're here to, have courage and to show up. And in Cancer, we just want to connect, and we often get really stuck in our feelings and really feel kind of, maybe like a victim or very weepy, or like, woe is me, everything's so hard. And it can be really hard to pull ourselves out of that. So Mars's shift into Leo is like a big collective win where everyone's like, okay, I can do this now. I have my courage. I have the capacity to act. I want to get up and exercise every day. I want to strengthen myself, and I want to fight the good fight. I want to do the things that I need to do. And Mars is particularly good in Leo because Leo's connected to the sun. It's connected to our source, our consciousness itself, our source of light, right? The source of life here on Earth. And so the general of the army, Mars, is getting his marching orders from source, from our consciousness. And in Magha in particular, and by this full moon, we'll have moved out of that little sliver of the Gandanta point, which is the sort of karmic knot we have to pass through at the last degree of Cancer, first degree of Leo. And he's now out of that by just a little bit. And in the star of Magha, which is about the ancestors and receiving, it's the part where the king is really connecting to lineage and to what was done before, both the good and the bad, and can receive clarity that can only come from being passed on. It's one of the reasons there is a guru lineage, is that knowledge needs to be passed. And now, again, in the internet age, everyone can just look things up, look mantras up, look up information and say they know something. Or anyone can teach a class after they took, one class somewhere, and then suddenly they're a tantric teacher, or they're a teacher of whatever. And ultimately, it takes time to know things, right? And also it needs to be passed. It needs to be transmitted from person to person. It can't just be transmitted over your internet connection, because you don't get the full download by just reading words and even using your mind to learn the meanings of them. You don't get the full power of the mantra. You don't get the full power of the information that you're taking in. So Magha is where we get that transmission from the predecessors of all of mankind. So Mars is in a place of receiving spiritual wisdom here from Jupiter, and they're in an exchange of, well, they're not an exchange of signs, sorry. Mars is in Leo, Jupiter's in Aries, but Jupiter's in his sign, right? So he's also calling him to action. And then Jupiter's also giving that drishti to our full moon, which is here to highlight the halfway point. Full moons are always where we're like halfway in between this cycle of information that Gemini has brought us into. And we're reflecting upon, information is not everything, right? Having all the data and all the, this is right, this is wrong, is only going to get us so far. We could just get lost in a sea of information. And we are quite literally drowning in a sea of information right now. And whether or not any one part of it is true or not is kind of irrelevant when you take a step back. Whatever things people are arguing about, if they didn't have a TV set per se, or if they didn't watch that news, or none of that would matter at all, right? It wouldn't even exist. There's a need to pull back and to drop in, not just to yourself, but into the natural world around you, where truth is found in all of its many, many ways. There's a need for us to remember, and this is a beautiful time to do it. And so we also have on Jupiter, we have a drishti from Saturn. So that part of Jupiter that's a bit impulsive is getting this one-way drishti from Saturn saying, hey, calm down, slow down. Now it's a retrograde Saturn, so it might be a little latent, might not be manifesting in quite the same way it was before it went retrograde. But there's this capacity to sort of rethink, is that really the right step I'm supposed to take? Is this really, should I rewind and do that differently? And there's this capacity for some caution or some practical reality coming in, some practical fears, real fears that come from knowing that some things go wrong, you know, and some people die, and some, you know, illnesses come or big tragedies come and we lose everything. And so it's a very harsh but yet real knowing that can kind of temper our quick steps forward. So there's a lot of magic happening here with Jupiter and with Saturn, his own sign. He's also giving this drishti back and forth. Mars and him are in exchange because they're right across from each other. It's a two-way drishti where Mars is giving energy to Saturn, Saturn's giving energy to Mars. Mars might be increasing the courage that Saturn is lacking, and Saturn might be bringing some hesitation to Mars. But again, it's a retrograde Saturn, so it's more internalized. Like any fear we're feeling is more under the surface. We're not as likely to actually hesitate as when Saturn's forward moving. But we can feel that anxiousness underneath the surface, perhaps. We might feel nervous even as we move forward. And in the beginning, it's kind of like stumbling forward, right? Because we've been so sleepy with this Mars here. We've been so sleepy. And it's really also a beautiful time because across from our moon, we have the sun and Mercury. And Mercury is in his own sign. And the sun is always across from the moon and the full moon, but Mercury is very close to the sun. It's what we call combust when a planet is close to the sun. And so we might not necessarily feel completely heard in our own communication, but this is a very powerful Mercury. He is capable of discernment, capable of seeing what's true and not true. So when we're totally stuck in Gemini land, then we might just get stuck in what's true and not true about these facts, figures, and details, as I said before. But when he's reflecting upon our moon here in Sagittarius, where we're getting in touch with our deeper wisdom and remembering what's true, he can offer some discernment. He can offer some intelligence and that capacity to really not get caught into the Sagittarius problem, which is confirmation bias, which is where we believe something because it's what we've seen so many times before, or it's what we were raised within. And everything we find a way to fit everything into that set of beliefs. You can really see these two problems when in people's individual charts. When somebody's got a lot of planets in Gemini, they sort of get stuck in this whirlwind of information all the time and proving something right or wrong. And they really forget to care about the big picture. And you really see when somebody's got too many planets in Sagittarius, how they're so easily stuck in their beliefs. And anyone can prove anything to them and it won't change their mind because it's like, this is what I believe. This is what I have somehow embedded in me. And this is our opportunity to uproot. Well, we've already had our uprooting by now. We've had the moon pass through Mula, but to really allow that which is true to get planted in and to recognize places where we have confirmation bias, to recognize places where we're swarming in a sea of information and not allowing ourselves to see the bigger picture. And we can act upon it with some appropriate fear. So this is really a powerful time for each of us. And I recommend taking some time alone. And, because of course, all of our friends and family and different opinions that we hear, our desire to be connected to others, our desire to be well-liked and part of a group, part of a clan of some sort, is so strong that we often go off on opinions or go into different holes just so that we have somewhere to belong. So taking time alone, and that would include not being on social media, and allowing yourself to be in nature somehow and to be with yourself and nature and really tune into what is true. As all the great sages have all lived in some kind of natural setting, and there's story after story of literally, I think in the book Siddhartha, they have him sitting just by a river, right? He's learning from the boatman. They have Siddhartha learning from this boatman, this man who takes people across the river, and he literally just sits and stares at the river. And more truth can be found in just watching that river run than in all the many, many conversations you can have with different people telling you what's true. I personally, in my own expeditions and travels, have found that I learned so much from people, but I particularly learn a lot from poorer people who are just living their life, not teachers or people who want to teach me something and share some information and knowledge, but somebody who's just living their basic life. And of course, that would also be true for like animals. If you can just watch animals do what they do, and you can just watch birds, and you can just watch insects, and you can just see what happens in nature without all the opinions and beliefs and other information coming in. And truth lights up pretty quick when you do that. And unfortunately, in our modern world, many people don't have enough access to nature. They don't spend enough time in nature. If they do, it's crowded. You know, it's a crowded beach, it's a crowded bike path. Even if it's a hike, there might be, 20 other people on that hike. And there's constant signs of other people where you see trash and then you get angry about the trash, and then your beliefs about people littering come up, or what kind of people litter, and then you go off on something. It can be very challenging to really just drop in, lose all the noise and lose all the judgments, because that's another place where we really go awry with Sagittarius, is get into deep judgment about things. And our judgments may or may not hold some grain of fact, but they're not true. We peg people as this whole thing based on one action or one word they say, or we write people off for that. When again, truth takes time. It takes time to see what somebody's character is. And often when you're engaging with people in the way we do in this world, we don't actually see what someone's actions are. Someone can be talking all they want about green and the environment and all this, and then they're hoarding boxes of Amazon things being delivered to their house every day, and giving their kids a lot of plastic junk. And it's like, great, I'm glad you vote and scream at everyone else online, but you're not actually helping the environment in your daily life. Whereas someone else might not vote green, but they might be farming every day. They might be working with the earth and the land every day. So our actions really do speak quite a bit louder than our words. But at this moment in time, our words are so much of what people hear, and what we choose to show of our actions, what we choose to put out there and put on the internet. And so we have these sort of curated images of ourselves and others. And that can get us into this other problem, which is this idea of hypocrisy, not wanting to appear hypocritical, not wanting to show any shadow side of ourselves. And of course, any truth must include the shadow. For there to be light, there had to be darkness. There has to be something to come from. And so if we are able to be true to ourselves and sit with ourselves in that place without all the worry of how we look or how other people will perceive us, we can really find our line, our through line of what we're actually following, what path we're actually on, what are we chasing, and where is it getting us? And from there, move forward and act. So I wish you all a very blessed full moon and Guru Purnima, and many people here in the US will be celebrating the 4th of July on the day after this full moon. It's not my own favorite holiday for some reasons, but I do find it to be an important time to reflect upon what freedom means, and freedom in all of the philosophy and teachings of ancient people, not just in the yogic world, but in small indigenous cultures all across the world. Freedom comes from within, right? It's something that we give ourselves. And again, that time in nature and that time with ourselves is where we start to free all the things that we think we need to be, and all the things we think we need to do, and all the enemies that we think we're up against, that we're fighting against. So I think, if we can reflect upon what freedom means and how we achieve it, and not just sort of make it a bumper sticker or a slogan, a way to chum up with other people, that can be a much more powerful way to experience this holiday if you celebrate it. So I wish you blessings. And if you have not yet seen, I've created my new website, radahomeastrology.com. I will have a link at the bottom. You can check it out. And all my readings are readily available to just book right on the spot. Give myself a little freedom. And in celebration of finally launching this, I'm offering all my readings for 11% off for the month of July. So until the end of July, you can go on and book and use the coupon code. There's actually a pop-up that will tell you the coupon code, but it is new 2023. So I will see you soon. And I'm still doing my reports, but if you want to get the breakdowns for all 12 rising signs that I do every week for the weekly stars report and for the new moons and the full moons and major transits like the transit of Mars just moving into Leo, you can go onto my Patreon site, which is also Rada Home Astrology, and you can join for a week trial free and check out what is actually happening in your own chart, because what Mars is doing in Leo is different for each of us, and what this full moon means will be different for each of us depending on what house it is. So I hope to see you somewhere soon and see your likes and comments and shares. Until next time, namaste.